insomnia follows you throughout the day. It's like that constant someone poking you on the shoulder, reminding you, you have this thing and you're going to experience it again tonight and tomorrow night and the next night. It was seeing the disappointment on my kids' faces every day whenever they wanted their dad to do something with them and I was just too tired. It was beyond anything that self-help, herbal tea, sleep hygiene was going to fix. I had to have a really honest conversation telling her that I'm not saying that I don't want to live anymore, but this is the first time I've understood why that could be a relief.
I'm glad. I'm glad you found me. And
So much. And that became the thing that I told myself every day. The fourth or fifth night I did that, I laid down at 11 and I slept until 5 o'clock. That's more than I slept all of last week put together. This isn't going to control my life anymore. I'm going to take the risk and I'm going to try it. And I remember driving back and thinking to myself, you almost threw this away. You almost let insomnia take this experience away from you. It's just the normalcy of feeling like a human being again, of waking up in the morning and being like, I slept pretty darn good last night.
Hi, everyone. If you're in a really dark place now and it feels like you've lost all hope that this horrible condition can ever be overcome, Justin is here to show you that that is simply not true. But you're not going to get there with tips, tricks, or hacks. So consistent behavioral changes over a long period of time, a lot of self-kindness is how you are going to get out. And we're going to talk you through exactly how to do that now. Thank you very much for coming onto the channel. To kick off, if you could just give us a little background on your insomnia, when it first started, how it made you think, feel, just to give the people listening the confidence, no matter how bad theirs is at the moment, this can be beaten.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, like my insomnia came and went in waves. It was, it was seemed very situational at first. It started back in probably 2010, 2011. And at the time, I was a full-time student, taking a very heavy case or workload there, like 6 to 8 classes a semester. Year round, I was working 3 jobs. My wife and I had just gotten married, and we were paying my way through college. So at the time, my sleep was very interrupted out of necessity, just so many hours in the day with all the work that I had going on. 3 or 4 hours a night was really kind of all that I had. But what I found was as my life leveled back out after school and getting back into normal life, my body had just kind of decided that that was the sleep that I was going to get. And it would kind of come and go. It would definitely be the more stress I would get, the worse that my sleep would get. But I was always able to explain it away of, oh, it's just because I'm under a lot of stress right now, or, I have too much on my plate. I don't have the time to sleep. And for some reason, over the years, that almost made it easier because I could always point out, oh, I don't have a problem with sleeping. It's just that life's getting in the way, or there's this, or there's that. And then I would have periods where I would sleep well again, and then it would kind of relapse back. And then it wasn't until, this most recent period before I started working with you that the insomnia became something that was just overwhelming, something that I couldn't control anymore, or I thought I couldn't control. And it had just completely overtaken my life, and it went from the occasional sleepless nights, or maybe, a week here, a week there of, sort of, less than ideal sleep, to month after month after month of 45 minutes of sleep, an hour and a half of sleep. And then it just became this burden that was beyond anything that I could control, and trying every single, quick fix. Well, if you drink, tart cherry juice, or if you take this supplement, or if you have this herbal tea before bed, or, and I was doing all the right things, living a very active lifestyle, exercising very hard 5-6 days a week, eating a clean diet, and doing that for years, taking all the right supplements, doing all the right things you're supposed to do. And then every time you do all those things, and then my sleep was worse the next night, then it's just reaffirming that this is unfixable and there's nothing you can do. And then the way that transferred from just being, oh, I get sleepless nights, to every moment of my day, every waking hour of my day was consumed by this idea that I'm not going to sleep again tonight. And then that coming true every night was just reaffirming that in me, that it just became where that was just every part of my day was
Mm.
consumed by the fact that I now have insomnia. And
And I,
then that's what kind of brought me to working with you to begin with.
yeah, and I think people miss that when you hear and you go to your doctor and they talk about sleep hygiene or they talk about it, no one ever understands what insomnia really is. And you described it really well, that all-consuming obsession that you get during the daytime. So it's not just at nighttime where you're struggling with your sleep. It is something that controls and dictates your entire life. And it's such a damaging thing, I think, when you just see online all these, like you called them, the right things, the cherry juice, the tips, the tricks, and you've got this real chronic condition, and that's all you're being offered. And you think, well, that's what's out there. This must be what's going to fix it. Am I doing it wrong? Am I and I think it can be so damaging to people's sleep with all this nonsense that you've just described out there. And what was it doing to your mental health and your ability to actually you know function during the daytime and your view of the future? And I don't know how deep you want to go with this, but what was it doing to you and your family and your life? Just a little bit more on that, just to show people that you can be in this really dark place with it and can get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, I think that's the biggest misconception with insomnia, and something that I never understood with whenever you hear about insomnia, you think, oh, well, it's you can't sleep and you're really tired during the day. And that's probably what makes it so bad. And that is part of it. But for me, the sleepiness was something that I could overcome. I could deal with the sleepiness. But it was, I think, what people who have never experienced insomnia don't understand. And you really don't know it until you've lived with it. And it's been just that chronic, condition or situation that insomnia follows you throughout the day. It's like that constant someone poking you on the shoulder all day, reminding you you have this thing and you're going to experience it again tonight and tomorrow night and the next night. And it takes every experience you have throughout the day, every time, I was trying to be present for my wife or trying to be an active, engaging father, going to sporting events, going to my children's, events at school, or just trying to, play with them in the yard or be here at the house with them, spending time with them. Everything you do is just like painted with this brush of gray. It just takes, that's the only way I could think to describe it whenever I was talking about with my wife is, it's like it takes the color away from everything. All the brightness is gone. It takes all the shine away. Like all day, every happy moment that you have, it's in the back of your mind of, yeah, this is great, but tonight I'm going to go through this all over again. And it's hard to explain it to someone who hasn't experienced that, because it never goes away, because nighttime's always going to be here.
Mm.
And for me, I've always been a person that I never really fully understood what depression felt like or what anxiety felt like. I could never wrap my head around the idea of what it would take to make someone not want to live anymore or not want to exist anymore, especially whenever they have so many positive things in their life, like I do, having an amazing family. But through dealing with this, I developed what really became crippling anxiety. I was having 20, so there were some days 20 to 30 anxiety attacks a day, where I would just at work, I would just have to shut my door to my office and just sit there and just have floods of anxiety attacks for sometimes an hour at a time. Um, my wife would come home and I would just be in the bed in tears, having my 15th, my 20th anxiety attack of the day, not knowing what to do or how to control it or how to stop it. The depression that came was unlike anything I've ever experienced with, right before I started working with you. Um, And it was, and I had to have a really honest conversation with my wife at the time of telling her that, I was like, I'm not saying that I don't want to live anymore, but this is the first time I've understood why that could be a relief and why that can feel like the better option. And it was a very scary thing for me because being a husband and a father is the greatest thing I've ever done in my life. And it's the only thing that's given my life real feeling of fulfillment and happiness. And it was the only time that I've ever sat and thought, I know me not being here, it would be hard on my wife, it would be hard on my kids. But in the long run, I think they would be happier because they could finally, maybe my wife could find someone else who could be a better father to my kids than I can because I'm just too tired to be there. I'm too unhappy to be present. I can't love them the way that I need to because I can't find the energy to even care for myself or to give them the attention that they need.
Yeah.
And that was whenever I had reached a point that whenever I first reached out to you, I had that thought in my mind of this is my last shot. If this doesn't fix it, I don't know that it can be fixed. And the only way that I could feel that I could save in my mind now looking back, I realized that this was, not the right way to approach this or think about it. But at the time, it was the only way I can save my family from the person that I'm turning into because of this is to just be gone from their lives.
Yeah.
And and that's it's something that I've never experienced in my life. But it was seeing the disappointment on my kids' faces every day whenever they wanted their dad to do something with them and I was just too tired. Or the times that of snapping at my wife or being, rude or mean towards her whenever she hadn't done anything wrong because I was just so exhausted and my anxiety was so high that day and I was just dreading the next night ahead of me. And I think that's the hardest thing about insomnia. It's not the sleepiness. The sleepiness is that can be overcome. You can move throughout your day and you can ignore the fact that you're tired, but you can't ignore the fact that it's going to happen again and again and again. And I had reached a point where I was like, if this is the rest of my life, then I don't know that I can go on living the way that I'm living. And that's where I was at whenever I had first reached out to you. And I think I kind of spoke to you a little bit about that of, not trying to put too much on you of, hey, I'm not saying that it's all resting on your shoulders right now, but you're kind of my last hope. But that was the best, discussion I've ever had was that first step of going down this path because it was beyond anything that any, self-help, herbal tea, sleep hygiene was going to fix. I had to completely change how I felt about sleep and how I thought about what I was going through.
And yeah, thank you for the honesty with that. I think yeah, that's what insomnia is, you know, real chronic insomnia. That's what it is. And that's that's why I do what I do, because I know what it is from when I had it, and I just hate that people are going through that when I know that they don't have to do that because it can be overcome, and it it is very hard for me knowing how much unhelpful stuff there is out there when people are really suffering um and going through something so hard, and there's nothing out there to um to help them with it. And it does do that to your mental health.
Yeah.
It's and that description of everything is gray. I called it like looking out of a train window, and everything is speeding past, and you're not part of it, and everything out the window is zooming past you, and it's all grey. I've spoken to someone, and she said it was like a wall around her, and she couldn't get through it. But the rest of the world was out there, and she could see it, but just couldn't get through it. And it's just this complete detachment and complete absence of life, and that, yeah. And then when there's no help out there, then it can lead you down to these really dark thoughts. And yeah, I'm glad I'm glad you found me. And
So am I.
yeah,
It's and my family is just so appreciative of the work that you do and the progress that we made. It was, I think it was probably maybe 4 or 5 weeks in, and that was the day that my wife, she's like, I feel like I'm getting my husband back. And that was a really big day for me because you can kind of, insomnia is, it's a very selfish thing to have in a way, because you become so consumed with, I need to protect my sleep at all costs,
yeah,
that, like, everyone else becomes, you're now secondary to what I need to do to get the sleep that I need. And
yeah.
to be able to set that aside and put that energy back into the people you care about
Mm.
is probably the greatest thing that I was able to get out of becoming just a normal sleeper again.
Yeah, and it's the guilt you feel. You don't even feel, because when you're in it, it's all just, I have to fit. This is all I can see. It's the only thing, and you know what you're doing is wrong, and it's not help. But you can't see a way out of it, and that there's so many things that I was ashamed about that I did when I had my own. I just completely stopped. I wasn't even, in the same bedroom as my wife. I was on the floor with a mattress in the spare room, and I was, you not embarrassed about the person that I'd become, but just because at the time I couldn't. It was all that I could be at the time. So it's hard to explain. Yeah, but yeah, yeah, everything you said was amazingly put. All right, so. Let's work through how you got out of it. I think no one can explain that better than what you've just described, insomnia. So you were at a point where you'd had that discussion with your wife. So it was yeah, it was kind of the last hope. So our first discussion, enough when we first met, you, you did come to me, and I think you had no hope, but it could be overcome. And how did things start changing when we first started speaking? What do you say?
Yeah, I would say, whenever we first started speaking, you said something that kind of became, and I don't think I've ever told you about this, but it kind of became sort of my daily mantra that I would tell myself every single day. And it was one of the things that helped me get through the most difficult times. Was I was explaining everything to you, and you could tell whenever we were talking that I had no confidence that this was going to work, but I was going to try it because I tried everything else. And you told me, you said, there's nothing special about your insomnia. There's nothing unique about it. Stop feeling like there's something about yours that's different than everyone else's. And at first, I kind of took that as, yeah, he says that, but he doesn't really understand my insomnia. He thinks he does, but mine's different.
Mm.
But once I could start wrapping my head around that, of there's nothing special about the insomnia I have. Insomnia is insomnia. And if this person can overcome it, then I can overcome it. And that became the thing that I told myself every day whenever I would start having that self doubt of, this isn't going to work, or yeah, it worked for his other clients, but it's not going to work for me. Is I'd tell myself, there's nothing special about your insomnia. There's nothing unique about what you're going through. Lots of people have went through this, and lots of people have come through the other side and have been able to get past it. And that's kind of what really started turning the tide for me, was just reminding myself that this isn't a unique experience. It's a bad experience. It's one that fortunately not most people don't have to go through, but a lot of people do. And a lot of people get past it. And the people that are willing to do the work can be cured of it because you see evidence of it. And that was whenever I started seeing just those little wins of, instead of getting 2 hours of sleep, I was getting 3 hours of sleep. And I would get those occasional 4 hours of sleep. And whenever I hit 4 hours, it was just like, I was like, I can't believe I'm getting 4 hours of sleep. It was such an amazing feeling, and it was just those little successes and just reminding myself that this isn't unique. This is not normal, but it's the same thing that everyone else is having if they're dealing with insomnia. And that was just kind of like that little stepping stone, that little glimmer of hope that I needed to just kind of keep going and keep pushing.
Yeah. And, in terms of doing the things that are hard to do, and it is always helpful to be genuine with people. Everything else promises, oh, drink cherry juice, and your fear and terror and your life that is no longer yours will get better. What were the behaviors changes that you were doing which started to give you these little glimmers of hope that this could be overcome, but were different from what you were doing in the past?
Yeah, I think for me, like one of the first things that was great was no longer having to do this elaborate nighttime ritual of, okay, I'm going to have lavender in this vaporizer next to the bed. I'm going to have it misting right towards me. I'm going to have this on my pillow so that I'm breathing it in throughout the night. I'm going to drink this an hour before bed. I'm going to take a hot bath right before I lay down. I'm going to take this supplement 20 minutes before bed. And I'm going to do no screen time for 30 minutes or an hour before I lay down, and doing all these things. And instead of just focusing on, I'm going to sleep. Whenever I'm not able to sleep, I'm not going to allow it to overcome me. I'm going to accept the fact that I'm going to be awake for a little bit, and that's okay. And I'm going to, for me, stepping away from the bedroom whenever I wasn't sleeping was one of the hardest things to do at first, but it became one of the most powerful tools that I had, because whenever I laid in bed, it just turned into revolving anxiety attacks over and over and over again. And removing myself from the situation and saying, you know what, I'm going to go in the living room. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to read for a little while. And whenever I feel sleepy, I'm going to go back to bed, and that's okay.
Mhm.
And just going through the motions and doing that, and realizing that, you know, the, I don't want to say the discomfort early on, especially early on in the evenings for me, was going to pay off in better sleep that night. And that was one of the hard things for me to do to begin with, is because I was the person that at lunch at work, I would eat as fast as I could, because then I could have 15 minutes to take a quick nap before getting back to work. And at dinner time, I would eat dinner, and then at 6:30, I was nodding off in the living room. And I would nod off for 15, 20 minutes, and then wake up, and then nod off for 5 or 10 minutes, and then wake up. And then I would do that for 2 or 3 hours, and then go and lay down and sleep for 30 minutes, and then wake up, and then I'd be up the rest of the night.
Mm.
And whenever you first started talking about sleep windows, I was like, it's impossible. There's no way I cannot stay up past 8:30. It just can't happen. And you told me, you're like, this is kind of where the work starts. You're like, this is not going to be easy, but you're going to have to commit to the process, and you're going to have to understand that you're going to have to make yourself sleep in the window that your body's letting you sleep for now, until you can get healthier, until your sleep can become healthier, more normal. But as so what I started doing is, I was like, it's 7 o'clock. I'm dozing off. I'm going to get up and I'm going to clean the kitchen. I'm going to move around. I'm going to straighten up the living room. I'm going to go do laundry. I'm going to do whatever I've got to do to stay awake. And my wife probably loved that part of it, because things are staying nice and tidy around the house. But once I was able to do that, and there was the first night that um, I was like, okay, I'm going to stay up until 11 o'clock tonight. And that's going to be my sleep window, is 11 to 5. And I think it was probably the fourth or fifth night I did that. I laid down at 11 and I slept until 5 o'clock. And I maybe woke up one time all night. And the first time I did that, I was like, that's more than I slept all of last week put together. And I did it in one night, doing this one simple thing that you told me would work. And I didn't believe you. And I was like, I'm just going to stay up and be miserable, then sleep for 30 minutes. And I'm going to wake up and I'm going to get even less sleep than I was getting before. But the first time that actually worked, and it wasn't, an overnight fix. It wasn't, oh, I slept that good. And then, okay, well, then I slept great from that point on. There were plenty of setbacks after that. There were plenty of other sleepless nights, but I saw that it could happen. And that's all I needed was to see that I can get a good night's sleep. It's not going to be perfect every night, but it can happen. And that first night that I was able to sleep almost through the night like that, I remember we talked that next week and I was on cloud nine. It was the first time you're like, how'd you sleep last night? And I was like, not good. But 3 nights ago, I slept for 6 hours and it's the best night of sleep I've had in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the best feeling. It was the first time that I believed that, my insomnia is not special and I can beat this insomnia just like other people have. And that was like the first time that I realized this really is going to work. Um, so yeah, that would be, if I could tell people one thing, it's do the hard work, do the hard stuff, because all the easy stuff is what gets us to where we're at the point where we feel like there's no hope. It's easy to take a hot bath and drink some juices before bed and turn off screen time for a certain amount of time and do, take melatonin and take sleeping pills. That's all the easy stuff and it doesn't work. But if you're willing to do the hard stuff, it may not happen in 2 days, it may not happen in 2 weeks, but it will work and it will get you there and it will cure you of your insomnia.
And I think, yeah, the little win, and that's really all you need is just that little win, that glimmer of hope. But okay, this is something real, this is something tangible. When you've lost all hope for anything, and then you just see one night, and then you go, okay, okay,
Yeah.
I can actually see what's going on here, and there is that now that confidence has been, oh well, I can't sleep, I can never, and then that just gets undermined just from one night of actually sleeping like a good sleeper, a
Mm-hmm.
normal
Yep.
sleeper again. That, well, if I can do it one night, then it's at least possible that I can do 2 nights or 3 nights, and then you just start having that confidence coming back, and it can do such a big thing, that first kind of breakthrough night where things are different to how they were. And I think, often people are very afraid of doing the sleep window and either the counter control or stimulus control, where you don't allow yourself to lie in bed ruminating, because I think, well, if I'm going to get even less sleep than what I
Mm-hmm.
was getting, but you don't. You end up actually sleeping, and the sleep you get is good, and it's consolidated and it's consistent, and you get that certainty back with your sleep and that predictability. Okay, this is actually working, and then things can start moving from that point. But I think just that setting expectations right, that it is very, it's a hard thing to do in the first 1 or 2 weeks, because everything your brain is telling you is spend longer in bed, do more, try more, fix more, and
Mm-hmm.
you're deliberately choosing to do the exact opposite of what everything is your brain is telling you to do. And it's only then, when you actually see the results, that you can believe
Yeah.
that it's going to work. So you had that early win. You had a good night's sleep. Well, we spoke, and you were doing better. How did it then progress from there? And what were you doing? What did we work through in terms of your thought patterns? If let's work through maybe from week 2 to 4.
Yeah. And week 2 to 4 was probably the most challenging period for me because I progressed really quickly early on. At least it felt very quick to me. I mean, within my first probably definitely less than 2 weeks was whenever I had that really great night of sleep. And then I was having some pretty, what, 2 weeks beforehand would have been a dream night of sleep. Still getting, some of those 4 hour days, those 5 hour days. And I remember telling my wife, I was like, it's really going away. Like it's going away. My insomnia is going to be gone. And then in week 2 to 4, I started having some really bad nights again. And it wasn't every night, but I started having a couple of nights here, a couple of nights there of just terrible sleep and just as bad as it had ever been. And I had that first little bit of doubt kind of creeping back in of you thought it was going away and now it's right back. You just had a lucky couple of nights. You had convinced yourself it was going to be gone, but now your real sleep is back again and you're right back where it's at and it's never going to come back. And I'd had several nights, we had a great check-in and I'd had several nights of great sleep. And I was like, things are going fantastic. You're like, great, just keep doing what you're doing. Let's stick with this for now. It's working. You're improving. So, let's touch base back next week and see how you're doing. And then next week, I was just completely deflated and just completely broken. I told you, I said, it's right back to where it was. I was like, I've had 3 nights of no sleep. And you told me, and that was where it was like, I had to change my mindset around what a bad night of sleep meant. And that's where, like you said, changing how you think about sleep and how you approach your sleep. And instead of, I had spent several days before we talked of thinking it's back and it's never going to go away. I just had a little bit of a glimmer of hope, and now that hope's gone, and I'm going to be stuck in this forever again. And you told me, it's like, you need to look at this as, okay, you had a rough night's sleep, but what positives can you get out of that? And I was like, okay, so, well, now I'm going to be even more tired tonight. My body's going to need sleep even more than it did before. And now there's a chance that because I didn't sleep great last night, I might sleep even better tonight. And it's normal for normal people have bad nights of sleep. A normal sleeper doesn't mean that you sleep perfect every single night. It means you sleep really good most of the time. And everyone's going to have the occasional bad night of sleep. So basically, you're like, stop letting one night dictate the rest of your life. And that's what I kind of started doing, was reminding myself, okay, last night was a bad night of sleep, but I can learn something from this. I can potentially get a better night's sleep tonight. And then what that's going to teach me is that one bad night of sleep doesn't mean that I'm going to sleep bad the rest of my life. And it was literally that day where I changed my mindset around it. That night, I got a good night of sleep again. And that's the most powerful thing that happened throughout the entire time. And you even told me that I would come to think this way. And I thought, he is out of his mind. But you told me, you said, you will come to appreciate the bad nights. Whenever all this is said is done, you're going to look back and you're going to say the bad nights was probably one of the best things that happened to me. And it was. Having those occasional bad nights. And it's easy to say that now. Whenever you told me that, I was saying, it's like, yeah, it's easy for you to say that because you didn't just experience it. But looking back now, the occasional bad night is the best thing that happened because it gave me the tools to be able to realize that a bad night doesn't mean my insomnia is taking over again. It means I just had a bad night and that's okay. And a bad night can mean that I'm going to have a fantastic night the next night. And that's exactly what started happening. I would still have a bad night, from week 2 to 4 and weeks 4 to 6, but I never again had 2 bad nights in a row. And up until now it's been almost a year, I think, since you and I stopped working together, probably about 10 months. And I've had a bad night here, a bad night there, but I've never had those 2 bad nights in a row because every single time I've been able to compartmentalize that of saying that was last night, tonight's a different night. And that was the most growth that I had. I learned more from the bad nights than I learned from the good nights, I think, in retrospect. So week 2 to 4 was probably the most growth I think that I experienced throughout the whole program because it taught me how to not just progress linearly every single day. Every day is going to be better. It was learning that the step backs or the setbacks can also teach you more and it can make you, it's just like, playing in sports or anything like that. Sometimes you learn more in your losses than you do in your wins. And that's kind of how I started approaching my sleep was every night of bad sleep, there's something I could learn from it. And then I can make my next night of sleep better because of it.
And it's it's so hard because we're gonna have people watching this still in the pit of their insomnia who haven't um started down the road of doing this. And that concept of you can have a bad night of sleep and be okay with it and accept it, it would just sound so alien to
Mhm.
them, and you will not be able to take that on. And it was this was what I was being told during my own. I could because you're so desperate to keep it. Okay, well, I've got hold of this now. I want to keep it going because if I can get a week, then I know that I can get if I can get 8 days, and then when you get that inevitable poor night of sleep, it feels like you've lost everything. Because before, when you've got insomnia, a bad night is awful. It's dreadful, but you haven't lost anything because you've always been having bad nights.
Yep.
When you've got something to lose, it's absolutely crushing when you first get them. But but everyone does. No, I've not had a single person to progress out of this linearly and never have any setbacks or bad nights. Every single person will have them. It's not whether or not you get them, it's your response to them, which is so important. If your response is, I've lost everything, I'm going to hunker down, I'm going to go back to my old behaviors that got me into this in the first place, I'm going to, and then that will reinforce just how awful these are. But if you can, as best you can, still try and live your day and you live your life as you would have done had you have slept well, that then teaches the brain, look, it's not what you wanted. Of course, you'd have preferred a good night of sleep, but if you can respond to this in the right way, then you can get a good night of sleep the following night. And then it's gone. It's always just one bad night, and that's all it is, and it doesn't turn into anything else. And so, really, the response and the meaning you put on these poor nights of sleep are what matter because you are going to get them throughout this process. So, it's very important to let people know to expect them. And yeah, it is the mindset you have. So, incredibly helpful 2 to 4 weeks. It was after that I think we started seeing some really big changes in your sleep. And so you had a big thing coming up where you wanted to go and stay in a hotel so you could get a tattoo
Yeah.
done
Yeah.
by a famous artist that you'd wanted to have an appointment with her for a long time, and she had an opening. And this, I remember something that was causing you a lot of anxiety because you were sleeping well. But it was what I can only sleep well in my own bed. What if I go and stay in that hotel and travel on that aeroplane and things revert back to how they were? Can you tell me more about this? Because this is something that's very important. An important step with insomnia is to start deliberately choosing to do the things once you're at a better place that cause you a little bit of anxiety just to prove to yourself either you can sleep there or you're not going to allow insomnia to tell you what you can and can't do. You're not going to let
Right.
insomnia tell you you can't get a tattoo. If you tell me a little bit more about that experience that you had.
Yeah, that was one that was I was very, very, very nervous about. And I was very worried about it because I had built such a habit of being so protective of my sleep that before it was protective of the sleep that I wasn't getting. And then that changed into, well, now I'm protective of what sleep I am getting. And I, like you said, I have to have, and the room has to be this temperature. I need to be in my bed. I need to be at my home and with my pillow. Everything needs to be just right because this is how I've been sleeping, you know, and it's been working and I've been sleeping great. So now if I throw anything that's going to change that plan, which, in this situation was just sleeping in any environment other than my house, I was like, I'm not going to be able to sleep well. And in my mind, it's like, I'm going to go there and it's going to take back all of the work that I put in.
Mm.
And I'm going to go right back to sleeping poorly. And then whenever I get home, I'm going to start all over again. And I was very worried about it. And yeah, and this was like, it was one of those, bucket list opportunities for me. To be able to get in with this artist, it was very difficult. I had tried several times in years past, never had any luck. And this was something that there was a sudden opening. They reached out and said, "Hey, if you can fly up here next weekend, we can get you and you can get your tattoo done." And I told my wife, and I was like, I need to do this, but I'm really worried, because things have been going so well, and I don't know what's going to happen whenever I go up there. And she told me, she said, well, you've wanted this for years, you need to do it. And I talked to you about it, and this was kind of the first time that I decided this isn't going to control my life anymore. I'm going to take the risk, and I'm going to try it. And if I don't sleep well, that's fine, but I'm at least going to tell myself this is one time that insomnia is not going to take this experience away from me, and I'm going to do it no matter what. And it's funny that I went there. I drove from here to a city a couple hours away to fly out the next morning. And this was whenever I realized that it was the changes wasn't dependent on where I was at, because the next morning I actually overslept and almost missed my flight. I slept so well at the hotel that I slept through, like I forgot to set my alarm, slept through it, woke up an hour and a half late, and had to rush to the airport and barely made it to my airplane in time to fly out. And I remember sitting on the flight, and I was on the way out, and I finally had time to take a breath and think about what happened. And I thought to myself, I was like, if this isn't an example of this is really working, that not only can I sleep well someplace else, I can sleep so well at an airport, or I mean at a hotel, that I can oversleep and almost miss my flight. I'm sleeping so well, then this is really working. And I remember that whole trip, I slept fantastically, just as good as I did at home. And I came back home, and she said, how was it? And it was such a freeing experience that I realized, like, success isn't contingent on where I'm laying my head at night. I can be successful with this program no matter what I do. And that was whenever, before that, probably 2 or 3 months prior to that, the idea of sleeping anywhere else was just terrifying to me. We had planned a trip with the kids a couple months after I took that one, and we had planned it beforehand, and I was terrified because it was a week long, and we were going to be out of town, and we were going to be in amusement parks all day at Disney World. And I was like, this is going to be so difficult because I'm so tired, and I'm not going to be able to sleep, because this is before I even started working with you. I was like, I'm going to be there awake all night, and then I'm going to be having to be in these amusement parks out in the sun all day. I don't know how I'm going to get through it, to the point to where in the back of my mind, I was thinking, and I feel horrible saying this now, but I was thinking, how can I get out of going? How can I miss out on this dream trip with my children, making memories that they'll have forever? How can I not be present for them so that I can prioritize my sleep, because I'm not going to be able to do it? And then that trip was what cemented to me, is like, no, Justin, you can go, and you can be a good dad, and you can be a present father or present husband, and you can have a great time on this trip. And then we went on that trip, and it was an amazing week. I slept great all week. The kids had an amazing time, and we built all these amazing memories. And I remember driving back and thinking to myself, I was like, you almost threw this away. You almost let insomnia take this experience away from you that you could have never gotten back. Like, you only have one opportunity to have this trip with your children at this age. And I almost let insomnia take that away from me. And that, so that little 3-day trip was sort of the catalyst that led to being able to be present and have the most amazing week with my family that I could have had, all from you kind of telling me, you're like, hey, I'm not going to make you do this, but I think you need to do this. If this is something you want to do, this is your first opportunity to say, I'm taking the power away from insomnia, and I'm taking control of my life. And it was such a like a learning experience for me. And it's just translated into so many other areas of my life after that, all from, which sounds silly because it's like getting a tattoo was something that helped change my life, but obviously it wasn't the tattoo, but it was the being willing to go and do that. And being willing to say that I can still be successful there was such a mind shift for me that's translated Joe's from that point on.
Yeah. And it is that fearless approach, which when you're doing better, that's kind of the next step with it. It's not a case of you have to leave things where they are now, because that's still insomnia telling you, right, well, I can sleep well, but only under these circumstance and only under these parameters. So it is really important once people, and this is, I always ask people to actively choose to do it themselves. I'll never push someone to take on anything that they're not ready to do at that time. But you were in that position to want to start doing that, and so it was really important that you did that. And it's not even about when you go on this trip. If I can go on this trip and sleep really well, then I've won, and that's. But if I go on this trip and sleep really badly, that's a loss. It's just actually choosing to do it, which is
Yeah.
what matters. Obviously, it's great that you went and you slept well. But the win was when you decided to book that flight and go no matter what. That is you no longer with insomnia, because someone with insomnia wouldn't have even thought about going on that at all, and they would have let insomnia tell them that they can't do that. Someone who doesn't have insomnia just goes no matter what. And yeah, it's amazing you slept well, but I think you'd have still had that win even if you'd have slept badly in that hotel, because you had that kind of heart and courage to actually step into life and do it. And there'd have been
Hmm.
another occasion where you'd have done it again and you'd have slept well in a hotel.
Yeah.
So it might not have come then, but it will come eventually. And so it's such a important, it's exposure therapy. If you're shying away from these things, which people do, I can't do this, I can't do this, your life just narrows into this really narrow column of what you are and aren't allowed to do because of your insomnia. And it's very important that people start expanding their life once they start sleeping better. And I think that was a real, yeah, that was a good breakthrough week. And this was really towards the end of the program that you did that. So it's almost perfectly timed. I should have rang her up and thanked her for that, booking you in at that point. So I think that was very much towards the end. If I'm not mistaken, that
Yeah.
was possibly when you'd come back from that. That was our last session working together before we did the aftercare session, which was 2 months after your course completion. So finishing the program, how did it look? Let's going forward. And it's been, I think it's been at least a year since we left. How's the last year been since overcoming this? Your setbacks, anytime you've had any doubt or any time you feel that you've gone backwards, how has it looked coming out of this and through the other end?
It's been this last year. Whenever I compare this last year to right before, started working there, especially probably the last 4 or 5 months before we started, it's like I've lived two completely different lives. Everything has changed, and it hasn't all been perfect. I've still had bad nights of sleep. In fact, probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, probably about 3 weeks ago, I had probably the worst night of sleep I've had since we started working together, or since we finished the program. But it was one night of really, really poor sleep. And then the next night was a night of fantastic sleep. And it's normal. And that's the best way I can explain it. Is it's not that I sleep for 9 hours every night uninterrupted and I wake up feeling refreshed and perfect every day, but I just sleep normally.
Mm,
I have the occasional bad night, but I have mostly good nights. There's still nights that I go to bed, and even now, almost a year later, where for some reason I'll still have that little glimmer of thought in the back of my mind of, man, I just hope I still sleep good again tonight. And that's still something that I'm overcoming. I still have that thought in the back of my mind. But the difference though is I have that thought and then I'm able to remind myself, Justin, you've slept great for 90% of the nights for the last year. So what if tonight's not a good one? Because 9 out of the next 10 nights, you're going to sleep fantastically again. So it doesn't matter.
mm,
And the confidence that's built from every single day, every time you have that good night's sleep, of reminding yourself that this is normal. It's just the normalcy of feeling like a human being again,
mm,
of waking up in the morning and being like, I slept pretty darn good last night. It may not have been perfect every single night, but I slept pretty good last night. And I feel refreshed and I feel energized. I'm able to spend the time with my kids that I want to spend with them. I'm able to do the fun things with them that I used to do. It's just, it's such a freeing feeling of just knowing that I'm just a normal person again.
Mm.
And that's the best way to explain to people is don't come out of this program feeling like now your life is going to be perfect and everything is going to be roses and you're going to have the better sleep than you've ever had in your entire life, but you're finally going to remember what it's like to just be a normal person again and just a normal sleeper again. And you can be present for your family and you can be present for your friends. You can do the things that you love to do again. You can have passion about things again. And that was one of the biggest things, for me. Like I'm a lifelong hobbyist of just I'm always finding new things that I enjoy doing. Whether it's woodworking or playing music or sports. I was really really active into fitness. I ran ultra marathons and loved that sort of thing. But towards the end of my insomnia, I didn't have I didn't have the energy to go out in the gym and work out the way I wanted to. And I didn't have the desire to do the things that meant things to me. Playing my drums was something that I had no interest in. I didn't even want to touch them. I didn't care about music anymore. I didn't think about music anymore. I hadn't touched didn't touch my drums for a year at a time. Now it's back to being something that I absolutely love. I love sitting down behind my drum set again. I love playing music again. My kids love hearing the new song that I've learned how to play. Or whenever if I record something with friends, they love hearing that new song. It's something that I'm able to just have just passion for things. And that's something that people don't realize that you lose whenever you have something like this because there's no room in your life for passion anymore. It's everything is just consumed by this thing that you have, this thing that you're fighting through. So this last year, just to be able to have that time and that energy and that focus to be able to say, I have time in my day to do the things that I care about now. And the biggest thing for that is spending time with my wife and my kids. It's been such a life-changing experience, from because I think this time last year, my life was in shambles. I was at the darkest point of my life. And then I look back at, now, like this time last year at 8 o'clock, right now I would be in having anxiety attacks in full panic mode, thinking, what else do I need to do tonight to get a good night's sleep? Whereas tonight, I know that there's a 90% chance that tonight I'm going to sleep great. And if not, it doesn't matter because I'm going to sleep great tomorrow.
Yeah. And that's the mindset shift, but but you're out of this for good. It's not that you can ever avoid poor nights of sleep, with everything I know, but I still get them and everyone still does. It's how you respond to them and just that you live your life again and you're just a normal you have what everyone else has. So if you've got any closing points or just suggestions, or if you were to really boil it down into a nutshell of what if people are first starting out on this journey and they don't yet have the confidence to take on these quite hard behavioral changes, what would you say to that person right now, if they're at a point where they don't have a lot of hope, but and they are where you were a year ago? What would you say to them?
I would say that no matter how dark it feels and no matter how hard it feels like it is now, it absolutely will get better. It's not a matter of it can or it might. If you do the work, I'm living proof of it. There's nothing special about me. I'm not someone I didn't do anything outside of the program. I didn't do anything extra. I just followed the program. I just did the work. I did the hard stuff. If you can do that, it absolutely will cure your insomnia. There's no way around it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You won't spend the rest of your life doing all these crazy tricks. You're not going to be on medications the rest of your life. You're not going to be reliant on anything other than just sleeping whenever you're sleepy. And the freedom that comes with that is you don't realize how good that felt until you get it back and you remember this is what normal sleep feels like. And you absolutely will get better. There's nothing about your insomnia that can't be fixed. I went into this not believing that it was going to work. I even told my wife, I said, I'm going to try this, but I just don't know. It seems difficult, but it seems too easy. It's too straightforward.
Mm,
There's no way that just doing these few little things is going to help. But I promise you, if you do the work, it absolutely will go away.
mm,
And you will go back to being a normal person. And you're going to look back and you're going to say, I'm so glad that I took the first step to do this. Because whenever you're at your darkest point, you can't even begin to fathom the idea of sleeping 8 hours in a night, but you absolutely will get there. Or maybe your normal night's 7 hours, or maybe it's 6 hours, but whatever your body needs, whatever your normal night's sleep is going to be, you are going to get there. And you're going to look back and you are not going to regret any of the work you did, because I can promise you there is nothing about this program, no difficulty, nothing about it is harder than life with insomnia.
mm.
So and that's what I kept telling myself is this isn't easy, but nothing is harder than what I've been going through for the last 6 months or the last year, or however long it is you're going through it. Nothing is harder than that. So just do the work, follow the program, have confidence in it, have confidence in yourself, and you absolutely will get through it.
I think that's it. Awesome. Thank you, Justin. Thank you for being so honest, especially at the beginning because I think people need to hear that. Because there will be people watching exactly how you were then at the kind of the last point in their life, and just to hear that you can be at that point and then be free is you need to know that if you've lost all hope. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm really
absolutely.
happy at how far you've come, and yeah, I'm glad that I could be part of it. But it was you that did it. It was you that chose to do the work. So I think that's probably the takeaway that it's I can help you as much as well, I can help people as much as I can, and I will do as much as I can. But ultimately, it's you that gets yourself out of it, and that's an important, empowering message, I think, to people. But you're the person that chooses to do the behaviors and the thought pattern changes or not, and but it can be free, and both of us here are living proof of that. It can be free. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on and sharing your story. If anyone in the comments section would just like to say thank you for Justin to Justin for sharing his story, and if any points resonated with you, just put down which point in the conversation we had that you enjoyed or you felt the same. Thank you, Justin. And thank you everyone for watching. Cheers. Bye bye bye.
All right. Thank you.